Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton. I'm sitting here with two people, with Eric Siepen and my daughter Abby over on the side. She's going to pitch in some good questions, little tidbits.
Tidbits, yeah.
And,
making her dad uncomfortable.
And then just imagine the whole time we're sitting up here in the loft of XO Coffee. Eric and I are talking. Abby is milling over a ball of blue slime the whole time. So that's the setting for this podcast.
And the music starts out quieter. As you can hear, it's getting louder right now.
Getting louder.
So our podcast actually starts, you might really hear the good stuff, and then the ambiance will take over at some point.
Yeah, but it's good. It's authentic.
It is authentic, and we just ask that you would listen to the pitch and really buy in. We're looking for buy-in, and also we're not just 5 stars, not just promoting your position for Faith Over Breakfast for free. We're also looking for donations, usually in the $1,000 denomination. If you could write that $1,000 check, we will send you some slime from Abby.
Abby will make you slime. You heard it right here. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so thanks for tuning in today. We especially talk about church, leaving the church, stuff like that. And so, enjoy.
Enjoy. It's Faith Over Breakfast with Eric Siepen, and who cares about the other guy? Some people say his name is Andy Littleton, and
other people say what?
I don't know. He's the Slime Girl's dad.
Slime Girl's dad, yeah.
We have a special guest or audience member,
sort of guest with a really great little laugh.
But we're going to just from now on refer to her as the Slime Girl.
Yeah, Slime Girl Littleton over here. And she's in charge of kids at Mission Church, as she's declared in the past.
She's kid ministry coordinator or director?
Or in charge of
kids.
In
charge of kids.
I don't go to be a kid in the class. I go to help with the kids in the class.
Yeah. Sounds like a pastor's daughter to me.
It does. It sounds like the way that you, Eric, approach the village. Like, I don't go here as a part of this church. I go as the one in charge of this church.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely.
I'm the only kid in charge of the kids.
That's good.
And that's kind of how it is for us as pastors. We're the only kids in charge of the kids.
Yes, that's so true.
Whatever
we've been
that
found
means.
out.
I don't know. Yeah. Nick is in charge too, and a lot of other people.
Yeah.
We just had an elders meeting. They're all in charge.
All the elders are in charge.
This isn't so much a serious thing that we're saying here, but thank you, audience. Thank you, audience, for keeping us on track. Maybe we should have Abby all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. In actuality, that's my daughter Abby over there.
That is your daughter Abby, cute little Abby.
With us.
She's getting older and older.
Hi.
Yeah. There she is.
So we're back at XO, which feels right to me.
It does feel right. I think we're going to get some good sound quality today because there's no music, not a lot of people.
There's like quiet jazz down there.
Quiet jazz. This is the way we want XO to be for us.
Yeah.
And
they've got yoga going on downstairs.
Oh, do they have yoga?
Like outside
yoga.
So it's like very calm here.
Yeah, it feels very calm.
Yeah.
I was thinking before we get into the podcast, I think it's Brian is. He's back.
Brian,
he's been gone for a while,
but
there he is.
Still there. Yeah. Some of you know what that means. Some of you don't. That's okay.
There's the train.
The train reminds us of Brian, our old host.
Because every time he was about to make a really good point, the train would start,
and it would interrupt him.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's time for us to expand our empire.
Our empire.
Our Faith Over Breakfast empire. So we have a budget of $0. And unless
we've got more money than you and I have.
I think it's time to take this to big time, but we're going to need some promoters.
Oh, okay.
So we need to like a grassroots thing. So what we need to do is, I know we've got like 60 60 listeners. So if you listen on the Apple Podcast, we would love it if you go on and rate us. We would like 5 stars, but we'll take 4.
Or 1.
Oh, no, we won't take 1. In fact, I was just reading one of my friends posted something on Facebook about how he got banned for making comments on Amazon, rating products and stuff, and it was a mistake or something, so he's trying to work it out with the customer support. And the customer support would not move the next step forward if he didn't go back to his original email, follow a link, and make sure he rated them as satisfactory in the beginning, or they weren't going to continue to follow the whatever steps that they were taking.
So we won't answer your emails if you don't rate us 5 stars.
Exactly. That's kind of how
we've been getting
going.
a lot of emails from you, so this is a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. But I'm thinking, first off, the rating. That's plan number 1. We need all 60 to 70 of our listeners to rate us.
Okay.
And then plan 2 is if you have a vision for how to really bring us into the big time of podcasting, we have a salary for you of 0, and we would love it if you would join our team. And as long as you don't make us do any more work, and you do a lot of work, we're happy to have you promote us, do things to make our listenership grow and gain us advertisers.
Wow.
So that's
quite a pitch.
That's my pitch for
Thank you for
Breakfast Empire.
Thank you for that mild rant, because
It is an office.
because
Not more seating.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
We should have put the chain across there.
Oh, yeah.
Abby, can you go put the chain across?
All right. I'm going to send our intern downstairs to fill up the chain.
So I'm glad, Eric, that you went on that extended intro monologue, because I got to eat more of my kimchi sandwich.
Right.
So I just want to throw out there that XO's breakfast is delicious.
And we are at XO.
We are at XO. And the kimchi sandwich is good. Abby got an empanada. That's good.
I wonder where those empanadas come from. Do you know?
One of the local bakeries, La Estrella, maybe. I'm not sure. But anyway, when you're in Tucson, Arizona, you have these things. Empanadas, for those of you in Japan, are little pastries filled with fruit that I'm sure every country has some version of.
Some of them are filled with meat.
Yeah.
And spinach and eggs. And they fill those empanadas with everything.
So we're enjoying that here. And if you're in Tucson, XO's where it's at for breakfast, coffee, yoga. Apparently.
And I, true confessions, I'm not drinking tea today. I'm having a cortado.
Because it's a cloudy day in Tucson.
It's a cloudy day in Tucson. This is the first cup of coffee I've had since vacation. I had 2 cups of coffee on vacation.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
I only finished one, which was a cortado. I figured out I can kind of handle and hack one of these maybe once a month. And it's tasty, and it reminds me that coffee is good. Because every time I just have a cup of coffee, I'm like, oh, this is gross. I can't do this.
I, on the other hand, always get a cortado, but instead I got a cup of coffee.
Right. Yep, so there we are. You sent me 2 topics.
Yep, let's do it.
So it was either marriage or leaving the church. So I think probably to be uplifting, we should talk about marriage.
I was going to say we should probably talk about leaving the church.
Leaving the church? Okay, that's fine.
I mean, they're kind of the same.
They are. Marriage and leaving the church.
Making commitments to things.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I don't know. I thought about these things because I've got a meeting coming up with another pastor, and basically we're going to be discussing people who have left their church essentially, and visited us, and just talking about all of this and communicating and kind of honoring each other's churches in that. I mean, another church here, we had an email exchange about people that hey, this person's over here, did they go to your church? So this has just been something that I've been thinking about lately, because it's come up. So yeah, that's on my mind. People are always deciding. We get a lot of people who were a newer church in the heart of the city, and so we get people, and I'm sure you do too, who come over and
we used to,
and now
Well, I mean, after 16 years, you're in our place.
Right.
You're the new and different thing. We're kind of the established thing. People know what we are. So
You're the establishment.
We are the establishment.
Wow.
of kind of the alternative.
Who would have thought that
church community,
cutting edge, crazy Pastor Eric Siepen would someday just be in a humdrum establishment church?
Right. Well, at least I'm in a subculture of establishment. I'm established in the subculture. I'm okay as long as it's a subculture. Okay.
Yeah.
Being established.
Yeah. And your church, of course, for those who don't know, doesn't fit what you would call the establishment.
No.
But whatever. The point is, people are always coming to our church who are like looking for. They're like looking for a church, or they used to go somewhere and now they're back on the hunt.
Yes.
And so there's always that interesting discussion and I feel like the newer your church is, the more of that you probably get.
You do.
Hillsong, because we haven't talked about them lately, is getting a lot of that, I'm sure.
Oh, really? Have they even started?
I have no idea.
Well,
somebody did mention to me on Sunday that they were checking us out, and then they were also going to be checking out the new Hillsong church. So, I don't know. I
feel like I need to go check out the new Hillsong. If I were to go check it out, would you go check it out with me?
Oh yeah,
we could do an undercover podcast. Bring we could. Little tiny.
We're gonna have to wear tighter pants.
Yeah, okay, I can do that.
Yeah, you got some
I don't have
glasses.
You're
gonna have to get rid of that shell necklace.
Yeah, I know.
To go to Hillsong.
Well, it is Arizona Hillsong, so.
And I'm gonna have to wear I've been wearing large shirt. Like I've always been a medium guy, and lately I've just been like, I like what I want now out of a shirt is I want to twist to the right or the left and have the whole shirt move with me.
Right. And you don't want the buttons to pop when you move around.
Instead of the bottom middle of the shirt staying in the same position.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So but if we're going to go to Hillsong, I got to break out one of the old mediums.
Right.
Again.
Well, so let's talk about leaving the church.
Okay.
Because let's talk about why people leave the church. Why do you leave your church that you're at? What are some of the reasons that you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you leave the church? Why do you experience people leaving the church?
Well, for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's... very often it is that we're not enough in some way, shape, or form, right? That there's like... And then some people will come for a very short period of time and leave. We got our first 1-star review on Google, for example, and this was somebody who came, didn't think we were very caring, inviting, didn't come back, unfortunately, and I'm actually pretty bummed about it. But there's that kind of stuff, and then we've had people who came along and like through the they would be like, could your music be a little more like this? Yeah. Could your Abby's like, oh man, totally. That's how I feel.
Well, sometimes it is a little bit loud. I can hear it from, you could probably hear it from outside the church.
Wow. I don't know if you picked up all that, but Abby's talking about the volume.
The volume of music.
The volume of music.
At our church.
At our church.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's not enough, the kids ministry isn't big enough or interesting enough, or there's not something, came for a while and I didn't make friends, or I'm sure the one I don't hear is the preaching stinks, or it's better over there, or people are nicer somewhere else, or I don't know.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think that, my experience at Grant at Tucson, which I think is a little bit more unique in its church hopping environment, because it's actually got a smaller Christian community or evangelical community. The big reason that people move who are Christians, one, is because of the youth ministry. So is there something for my children that's really good in their mind, quote unquote, meaning organized, lots of exciting for the kids want to go back to it. That's good. Not necessarily creating disciples or anything like that. The other one is the preaching. People have this idea, I think all evangelicals do, but I think a lot in Tucson, they follow the preacher.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about what particular kind of exegetical preaching
or
enter-
whatever
or
version they like the
entertaining
most.
oriented,
Yeah.
you know, preaching. So preaching becomes a big part of it.
And then music, I would say.
Yes, then
yeah.
music is like, but if you have a really good, like, quote unquote speaker, in the sense that he like he gets a lot of crowds, or he's very like his exegetical speaking is just sounds like he spent 50 hours on his sermon.
Yeah, like you.
Like me, then people can handle the music.
See, I've almost observed, I wonder if it's changing, because I've almost observed the opposite, that people will, if the music's really great,
They'll
handle
deal with,
or tolerate. Like,
and I think that's probably the younger people now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think my parents,
right?
They've moved around for the preaching. They moved around for the youth ministry.
I think that would be true of. And my parents were a little different. They had different versions of church background and wanted different things as a couple.
Yeah.
So I didn't so much experience that.
Right.
But my wife's family, like if you talk to them, they left a really great church because it didn't have much of a youth ministry,
right.
and they love that church, speak highly of it, but they just had to go. And when you talk to them, it's not a sense of like, it's really, oh gosh, we had to really pray or debate that, or I mean, maybe they did, but what you hear is just like, oh, they didn't have much of a youth ministry. We had to go, we had to leave that church and go to another church.
Right.
That was just the only way.
Well, and this is my whole problem with it, is especially when the majority of churches are small, so when you leave, you're leaving a hole in a church,
right?
Especially if you've been there a while. But the other thing is that I think we've sold people on the whole consumerism thing. So I'm consuming the preaching, the music, the children's ministry. I'm not coming as a person gifted into that body and to bring what I have to bear in that body.
Right.
And I'm also not looking at the deficits and saying, what can I do to step in to help, not what can I do
if this doesn't change, I will just go.
Right. I think we don't see church life as a calling.
Right.
We don't see, when I think about Jesus, like, he calls followers and then says crazy things like, you got to take up your cross and follow me. Like, mom and dad, they're not that important. The mission is important. Like, he said these crazy things and continues to say these crazy things. And then Paul jumps into all of it and says it's crazy things. And all of Acts is crazy.
Can you imagine, like, being like in the Corinthian church with Paul, and he read through that letter, like today? Mm-hmm. I think people today would get that letter and be like, I'm going to go down the street.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I've heard,
Jesus.
I listened to this podcast, small church podcast.
Yeah.
And I hear this from other, consultants and all those kinds of things, that your church is not going to be as passionate about you or about the mission as you are about your church.
Right.
And I think, yes, there's truth in that, but that's stupid.
Yeah.
It is stupid. I mean, I think like you're telling me that like the mission of God is not going to be as important to my people as it is to me. I would hope that it is more important to them than it is to me.
Yeah.
And that they challenge and push me to be more excited about it. But that means your church is going to be full of disciples, not necessarily attenders.
Yeah.
The attenders hopefully are in the homes of the people who are disciples.
Yeah.
And that process is happening that way. Because my experience, you teased me last podcast that I like megachurches.
You love megachurches.
What fascinates me about megachurches is that they're amazing social clubs that have interesting impacts. But most of the time you're going there to hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
And gospel groups and small groups and all those, and missional groups and all those things, for the most part, are just buzzwords for smaller social groups where maybe, you have some interesting conversations. Maybe you do some ministry. Maybe you learn some stuff about the Bible, but you're not a disciple.
Yeah.
I know I'm being judgmental, but I don't care. Like, I think the church is in trouble in that sense because there's no urgency. And what happens is we have an idol of family in America, like in the American church.
I want you to unpack that, because that's a rare statement. Like, people would say the opposite usually,
Right.
like, we're not investing enough in the family. We got to make the family a higher priority. What do you mean?
I mean that as middle class and upper middle class affluent American Christians, we idolize our family. We want our children to have the best experience, because we bought into the cultural expectation that if you're not great by 21, it's over for you.
Right.
Like you don't have any, like, we lift up, people who succeed before they're, hit 30. Mm-hmm. And if they're not on track in 21, what's their life for? It's stupid. So we have to invest, and we don't want them not to be happy.
Right.
Like, we don't want them to miss out on all these things.
Right.
Like, they need to have the basketball experience. They need to have the swimming experience. They need to have the gymnastics experience. They need to have the art experience. They need to have, because they're going to be depressed and sad, and their life is going to have no meaning, and they're not going to be able to succeed in life.
So we as a church could learn something from Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
Have you heard recently he's been making a lot of jokes about kids and family.
I just started watching the new season of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
I haven't started that. Yeah.
He's talking more in these.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
for the comedians. The poor comedians have to listen to him go on and on.
Cool. That's fine. I know. But it's funny because it is very, in a way, like countercultural, where he's just talking about, like, people being so worried about their kids and giving them the perfect little room and the perfect little everything from when they're young, and buying them organic food and tucking them in and reading them stories, and he's kind of just like pushing back on that, like, this doesn't make any sense. Or of course he's making jokes. That wasn't funny what I just said, but it's interesting because you hear it and it's like uncomfortable. It's like, wait, no, isn't that like the one thing we're doing right culturally?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like we part of the human experience, the things that we're doing right now, we always assume are the right corrective to something that happened in the past.
Right.
But we're not really examining. What does this mean? When a kid grows up to think that the whole world revolves around them, and that the parents they have a better room than their parents. They have all of these amenities, all of this. The whole family is going to leave their church for you. Like, is this good setup for life? Is this realistic? I mean, no.
I don't think so.
Not in my experience. Like, when I got out into the world, everybody didn't make way for me and clear way. Not at all.
They didn't. And because I have sort of an inside tracking that my wife works at the U of A,
right?
They're panicking with the incoming classes of kids, over the next 10 years, because there's this expectation of success and a fear of higher suicide rates because they get failing grades, because there's dropping out at a higher rates because they can't succeed, and then they can't get their parents to, like,
Now educators can't say a hard thing to a student because they might lose their whole, foundation might fall right out from under them, because their whole life has been built upon "you're wonderful."
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you deserve the moon. Yeah.
Well, and I was just thinking about the idea that when I was a kid, even when I got home from school and was done with my homework, the first thing I did was go outside.
Yeah.
And my mother would call us in for dinner, and we would do the dishes, and then we'd go back out. And when it got too dark to really see from the street lights, we would go back in, and we didn't want to go inside. Right. Now kids have
all they want to do is just sit inside
and play video games.
Right. And we, as parents,
well, your dad's a good dad. He makes you go outside and play with the goats.
And that is, but sometimes that's pushing against what you want to.
You live with the goats, though, right? He makes you live outside?
No.
Yeah, Abby lives outside with the goats.
I go on a trampoline.
The trampolines are awesome. I love trampolines.
But
It's like
I wonder how much her voice will show up on this podcast.
That's
from
all right.
over there. We'll see.
We'll see.
I mean, I hope it does. But
Well, if we can usually hear people downstairs, we got to be able to hear.
you got to be able to hear Abby girl. But what was I going to say? Similar. Like, I've had similar observations that when I was a kid, same deal. Like, I didn't figure that the house was like my castle where everything in there was like designed to entertain me, and something like the living room was. I remember talking to a friend recently that they're like, we are setting up the living room, putting all the kids' toys in the living room, all this stuff, because like no part of the house shouldn't belong, to the kid. And I just, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, that's bogus. That's like, it's okay for the living room to belong to the whole family and be set up like, maybe there's something for the kid, but like when every room is kid-centric, when every activity is like kid-centric, frankly, when going to church is like, the parent is like entertaining the kid the whole church service, like things like this, we have to examine that.
Yes.
Is this what we're trying to train our kids for? Is this, and people I think generally will say like, well, it'll be like, this is just what I have to do to survive. Like this is just how, if you don't do this, a kid can't operate, can't get along, everything goes crazy. I don't believe that. There are whole generations of.
It's the opposite of that.
It's Abby says it's the opposite of that. But are we looking at thousands of years of human history where this was not the case, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think like people come to your church and leave your church due to what's offered.
Right.
Because it's partly a consumer kind of thing. They're not coming saying, okay, God has placed this community here to offer his word and to proclaim who he is and to step out into the world. And as I step in here, I have to ask, what is God doing here? What's Jesus doing? And is he asking me to join him in this community or not?
And how can I serve and lay my life down along with these other people?
Yes.
Right.
And find the discipleship that I need and offer the discipleship back. So that's, and welcome new people, or welcome new believers into the kingdom of God and defend the needy and the powerless. Like that's not where we're going. We're going to say, will I be filled up? Right. By the music? Is the worship going to be something that's going to fill me up? Is the speaking something that I get an edifying experience every Sunday where I can go, yay, I'm going to make it into my week? Right. And the thing is, my experience about listening to a preacher is if I don't know the preacher, I can go and sit and evaluate him, and in a very kind of harsh way if I choose to, right? But if I'm stuck in community with the man or woman standing up and speaking, and I've sweated out with them, sometimes, like what you would say, the worst sermon is the best sermon. Yeah. Because I know all the nuances behind what they're saying, what they're trying to communicate. I've watched them try to live out their life as a follower of Jesus. It means something much deeper. Yeah.
We have a summer intern.
Yeah, I saw a picture of him doing his first sermon.
Yeah, I did his first sermon, and this is a guy I've known and worked with since he was like a 5th grader.
That's pretty cool.
Yes,
isn't that cute?
Since he was your age.
That's adorable.
And it's been cool because all the comments I got back from his first sermon were just people were like, it was awesome, so great. But a huge piece of that is just over the last month and a half or so, like in general, especially because I talked about the fact that he was coming for a couple months, people at the church have like embraced the idea that they're investing in him and that he's been a part of my life and that we're here to build him up. And so then when he preaches, people are just like excited about that like he worked at this, he did a good job. Imagine how good he'll do when he's been practicing and when he's not as nervous or whatever, Sure. But just the general feel now, like if I were walking into the mega church and he were preaching, or for that matter I were preaching, I could easily be like, oh, this is subpar, right? No doubt. But when you care about this person, you're just like, you're listening to what he's saying, you're going, man, this is coming from his heart, and like It's different.
It is different. But I mean, I think that requires a lot, because I think we're conditioned, especially if you go in as a parent, let's say, with your children, you go to church, you're conditioned for you to have an experience, for you wanting them to be happy with what's happening in those communities. And then when churches begin to push you, if you go to a church that's creating disciples and they push you in places you don't want to be pushed, and you're not committed there, and you have a back door,
then
you're going to leave.
Yep.
And
I've absolutely I've seen that a number of times,
and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, partly, why I'm adamant about it is not just philosophically. I think it's just heartbreaking to me as a pastor, because you go and you pour your life out, and this is what you believe, and you know that you're flawed, and you know that your community's flawed, and when somebody leaves who especially has been involved in your community, you feel rejected.
Right.
And it's hard. I mean, I think God calls us into that rejection, and my identity isn't in somebody rejecting me, but it's still super painful and confusing.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to deal with it. You really don't. It's just that you have to mourn it, and you have to sit in just the disappointment of that God allowed that person to move to another place, and they don't. And that, I remember when Jesus, John, where he says to his disciples, after he said some really hard things about eating of body and blood, and he's like, well, you guys going to leave me too? Like, even Jesus had a sense of, internal, holy insecurity. Because his identity wasn't based on it, but he certainly was like, okay, who's sticking with me? Because this is the real deal, guys. And I've invested my life in you.
Now, what do you think is the biggest temptation? So I'm imagining Jesus in that. He's saying difficult things to them. Some of them are rejecting him. There's pain and all that. In which ways do we, as pastors, resist and are tempted to not enter into that pain? How do you? I think some would be just not engaging or just trying to accommodate everything. That's something that comes to mind. I don't know. How have you?
Being the way our church is, and it has so many points that you could choose to leave from, right? One, let's just say there's not consistent preaching, so you're not going to see the same person up there every time, so you're not going to get that feel, so maybe that's uncomfortable to you to have multiple voices. They're going to leave. The music is niche, so if you're coming for the music, you either really like it or you're not going to come because of the music. The discipleship kind of orientation, in fact, that there's a high level of expectation to holiness, I think, and to living, and where you're dealing with your sin and being honest with.
And you're going to be known, right?
Yeah, you're going to be
especially
known.
In your church.
So another reason to not be there.
Right.
So there's so many points to be rejected. A lot of people have left.
Yeah.
Over the years, and the temptation, I think. One, I'm kind of stupid this way. I'm just naive that I don't have the temptation to not invest. More when people do finally leave, I feel I could choose to be contemptuous.
Yeah.
Or to, and I feel confused because of how intimate our community is. I don't know what to do once they leave. Because there's this intimate friendship, but I can't maintain that anymore.
It's going to be different.
Yeah, and that's different. And
isn't it hard to see that person out at the coffee shop? And then you're in this position of going man, I was your pastor. That was our relationship, and now I know you. I know a lot about you, but you've kind of rejected me in that role in your life,
right? And
now here we are,
sitting and seeing each other at the coffee shop. Yeah, it's hard. I think it's interesting. Jesus on a mission, and people who didn't want to be on the mission, he didn't seem to hang out with them. He wasn't we'll have coffee. No, it was I'm doing this. You want to be with me? You can do this.
And I wonder, it's almost less of. Today there's the excommunication where it's like, here's a letter, you can't come to church here. And it seems like with Jesus, in a way, that happened, but the way it happened was just like Jesus was just moving forward. It was like, so if you're not coming, bye.
Yeah, like he did say you couldn't come hang out again.
Right, but it's just you're not going to.
Right.
I'm going this way, and I'm going to, and you're going to be known, and you're going to be exposed, and this is going to cost you your life, and so if you're not with me, you're against me, and so I'm moving this way. Well, I don't know.
My experience. So when we were young, like you guys, we were it, except for Second Mile was it just was about starting up, and the living room had kind of been going, but alternative communities who were trying to be missional in the ground, in 2001 were non-existent. So people who were coming to our church from other churches were coming from more conservative churches. Yeah. And so I was pretty committed to talking to other churches about the people coming and having those people ask for permission. Yeah. If it wasn't, if there was a relationship there, like if they were known. Yeah. Depending on the size of the church.
Right. Yeah, I've had that experience too, where somebody's coming from like the big mega church, they were never a member there, and you go, well, do you call this?
Right.
These people, it's like, do you call Walmart to tell them that, your kid took a piece of gum?
Probably not. But the thing is, I found is that pastors didn't want to have a talk about that. They didn't. They were threatened, and they didn't. That was, or they were like, I would call because there were people who left our church to go to other places, to the living room. This person, and they were baffled. Like, why are you calling us? Like, we're fine with these people. You don't need to like.
And you're like, did you know that they murdered someone at our church?
Do you want to know what's going on and why they left our community? And just to give you a heads up, no, that was so. The fact that you're going to meet with pastor and engage, I feel like things are changing.
I do too.
Context.
And we had in this other. I mean, I'm referring to a couple of situations, and in another one of them, like, the other church reached out to us. It wasn't weird. It was just like, hey, like. Is this person, a member of your church? We aren't sure. Just the fact that they went to the trouble to do that, great. Very honoring and good.
That's really cool.
And that's not always the case.
No, it is not always the case.
I can think of specific situations in which, people have showed up at, you get, stinking social media, right? You go like, oh, here's the post from that new church, and look, there's the people we thought went to our church at that church now, and you never hear from anybody on that. But then you don't know. Maybe they never told them. If a couple walks in and they don't really offer where they're coming from, I don't necessarily grill them. Right. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, and I think that there's another category of people. People leave because it's hard for them. They're struggling. Being amongst people, it's hard for them. And those people, I imagine, are where Jesus says you leave the 99 and you go after the one. Yeah. And I believe in that.
Absolutely.
That part of it. Because there's the leaving of Christians to other churches, but there's just people who are struggling.
Yeah.
And so
they're not around.
They're not on Sunday all the time. Like, no, you have to go after them. You have to really, God calls us to be with them and to call them back into the community and remind them of why Jesus loves them and by being his hands and feet to them. Because I don't know about you, but the question I get a lot of times from people is like, well, how do you hear from God? Yeah. And certainly there are all these theological ways, and Scripture is a key way. But usually what I tell them is, well, right now, me speaking to you and loving you, these are the hands of Jesus. Like he
works through.
He loves you. Yes, and that's where that's the exciting part for me about those are the people to pursue who leave your church.
Yeah, right. And usually those people they're not like, there's a marked difference between those who are shopping for a different experience and those who are just like, I feel shame, I feel guilt, or I'm just confused and I don't want to go around these people. Those people are usually like, from my experience, like they're just staying at home or whatever, going
Right.
like, I don't want to go there.
Right.
And it's like that's who you want to absolutely go and bring back in. Versus, I mean, not that you don't want to bring other people back in, but it's just it's different. It's, when somebody they're hiding versus going like, meh, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then marriage was the other little time. So you just did a wedding in your yard.
I did do a wedding.
And
It was
all that.
fun.
And so, maybe there's a tie-in between these two. Because it's like when you're involved in people's lives, like you're in the weddings, the funerals. I mean, I'm thinking of, again, like people who have, we were with them for these moments, and then some of those people are still with us, and we're experiencing new seasons of life together, and other people were around for like one.
Right.
I mean, how many times have you had people like they're getting married, they come around, they're a part of the church, they get married, and then they sort of disappear? Or you ever seen that? I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've heard from other pastors even recently about that. Like, oh, I did premarital counseling with these people, married them, they were all in, and then they were gone.
Yeah.
It's like kind of feel used.
Yeah.
Have people done that at our church?
Actually, less at our church, but it
Well,
just
what?
don't worry about it. It's just I've seen it,
Yes.
and similarly with a hard thing in life happens.
Yeah.
And these people, and then all of a sudden they need the church, and then that hard thing blows over.
Right.
Gone.
Well, I think when you face something traumatic, marriage or something like that, in a community that actually helps you,
Right.
And then you get healthy, and that has certainly happened at the village all the time, is that there is a moment after you really are able to get on your feet that you feel ashamed of where you were at or what you did.
And so
the
to just
shame
keep
feels more
walking
intense.
with these people. Right.
Even though now you have a different understanding of Jesus, a capacity to feel forgiven and to step into that forgiveness, you still feel ashamed or awkward or not knowing how to re-enter in a lot of ways.
And that probably happens just in marriage, but especially like somebody who's struggled or faltered, right? Like, and then there's been this restoration, but then to keep walking forward is like,
it's hard.
It's uncomfortable.
It really is. Yeah. So definitely, the marriage thing. Because the way we've always worked is Rod kind of marries the people outside of the church. So he gets a lot of people saying, "Oh, you're a pastor, will you marry us?" Mm-hmm. And I only will marry people inside the church.
Yeah.
And also the few that I have done outside, I have a mandatory 6 to 8 weeks you have to do counseling with me, and then you have to go to our church for those 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I understand that you may not come after those 8 weeks, but I want you to have an experience of what community is like, and people asking you questions about your upcoming marriage, and to see what a Christian body thinks about marriage, because usually they're not Christians.
Yeah.
Or one of them is a Christian and the other is not. So.
Yeah. It's anyway, there's something about, I don't know why, I saw those posts and I thought, it's funny, one of the things that jumped at me, which is great, which is not important, but I was like, Eric's wearing shorts. I love that.
Well, it was a tie-dye wedding, so I had to wear a tie-dye bandana. It was apparently mandatory, so it's like, okay.
That's awesome.
It was a good wedding.
But
it was by the way, just a funny story from the wedding. It was the first wedding where I had to actually stop the bride from trying to kiss the groom. Because she said her vows,
she was just like,
and then she was. I'm like, whoa! I get to tell you when this happens.
That's hilarious.
So it was pretty funny. It was a good wedding with a really good story. But
that's really sweet.
I was thinking about marriage that we should actually think about it this next week and do another whole podcast on marriage, things that we've seen in counseling that people face. That's what we think about by premarital counseling. What are good things that you should kind of prepare for as you step into marriage? Our own experiences of marriage.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that.
So this was the leaving the church one. And then, have you ever left a church?
Have I ever left a church?
Let's get personal here.
Have I ever left a church? Does being told to leave a church count as having left a church?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only time I've ever left a church.
Wow.
Yes, I was told to leave a church, but not for bad reasons.
Oh.
They were like, you need to leave because you're so good.
Well, I had such a big ministry that they brought in a new pastor, and they felt like our ministry was counter to his vision.
It didn't fit.
And so they asked not just me, my entire ministry of 80 to 90 people to leave.
Wow.
Or to reintegrate.
Interesting. That's a tough. That's an interesting. I remember big church here in Tucson had an evening service back in the day that was big. You and I may have both gone to that at some point. I don't know, but and eventually the church realized this. We host this thing, but it is not our church. It is another church, and they kind of it was like you closed it. I don't know if there was an option to like turn it into a church or go. But I just remember how painful that was for a lot of people who that was their
was their church, and then boom, it's closed down.
And so it's like the whole idea of like these like parachurch ministries or college ministries or student ministries that many of them. I mean, when you think about the Rob Bells and Driscolls a lot of these people started out doing the evening service at a church that really turned out to be a different church.
Yeah. Well, and I think the one thing that Mark Driscoll used to say that was good was he would say, if you're a youth pastor, stop.
Yeah.
And plant a church.
Yeah. 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 And which is often sort of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Abby notes that we've left churches. I mean,
I was going to ask you that. Have you left churches?
Yeah, and usually because I've been working in ministry since I was 18. That's when I had my first ministry job. So it's been generally different. Like I don't necessarily relate to the experience of going to a church. I've never in my adult life just been out looking for a church. I've always been working at it.
Right.
So that is different.
It is different.
And so when I did middle school ministry, even honestly had some convictions that maybe that wasn't the best system. I didn't totally believe in it at the end of the day. I loved working with the kids. I loved having relationships with middle school students, but the way we did it, which felt like there was a church for middle school kids and I was the pastor.
Yeah.
But I wasn't qualified to be a pastor of that church, which felt odd. Like, if I can't preach to adults, why would you let me train up your kids?
Right.
I don't get it, And so I was kind of back and forth on that, and I was open and honest about that, and but eventually decided, if I'm having these convictions, then I should go learn how to minister to adults.
Right.
So then I took an internship that I thought might turn into a position at that church, and it for several reasons wasn't. It was evident that's not it. That's not what it's going to be. And so then planted the church after that. But then early on, the other times earlier in my life when I left, it was because I got offered. My first ministry job when I was 18 was ended when a new pastor was hired, just because there wasn't enough money. So then I took another ministry position at the Salvation Army, and then I took another ministry position at Calvin Foothills here. Right. So it was always moving because it was like pursuing a role or growth or something. So it's So I guess that's an area where I need to realize, even in my critique of people leaving churches, I don't know what it's like to be just a Sunday church attendee. I don't know what that's like. I've never viewed church that way myself. Right.
Yeah, I had a question about that. I was going to say, have either of you ever wanted to be in the audience and not preaching?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Abby asked if we ever wanted to be in the audience and not preaching. Yeah.
That's why when I'm off, I go to your guys' church and other churches. Yeah, I was there just a couple weeks ago.
and we've gone. I don't know if it's ever has it been with you've been
No,
with us.
you
No,
were with
but we've gone to his church a few times,
Yep.
which it is very nice. And both of our churches, there are other people preaching, but you still feel a certain responsibility.
Right.
And it's nice to go somewhere where somebody else is responsible for everything, and you can just walk in, grab the cup of coffee,
Sit down. Right. And feel like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
I wonder why they're doing that.
Yeah, I don't get that. Oh well.
I thought just before we end about the leaving churches, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about your thing is that my experience of a lot of pastors is that it's a career. And so it's not just the people sitting in the community. We've communicated that pastors can move from church to church.
I know.
That you're kind of learning in a small church, and then you move to the 150 person church, and then the 300 person, and you're hoping someday that you're in this semi-mega church or big church. Like that's in your mid-50s.
Except I went the other direction.
Yeah, you went backwards. Your career declining or whatever.
I went from the big church down to the small church.
Right.
I don't really know if I ever want to go to a big church. I like our small church.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Yeah, Abby was talking about liking the small church. Maybe you can hear her. Maybe this is totally redundant, but just in case you can't. So you like the small church?
Sometimes big churches are too overwhelming and you don't know all the people. Like at small churches, when you know all the people, it's a little bit more comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like out a bunch of aunts and uncles.
Aunts and uncles. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think Abby. I mean, I watch you at our church, and it's like everybody knows you, and you know them, and they know us as a family, and I don't know. It's a cool.
It is a cool thing.
It's a cool thing.
I love that.
It's uncomfortable too, because like somebody could critique our parenting style.
Oh yeah,
which, you know, but
yeah. Or
but it's
on the
good.
other end, if you're like the pastor, like everybody holds you up as like the example, and there's that part of a small church that's harder. But
right.
Unless people personally prefer big churches.
Yeah.
that's true. Personally
Which
prefer.
they do.
They do.
Yeah.
I
That's a thing. I'm sure people prefer Rod and Eric. You know, Eric.
Yeah, there's none of that.
None of that. Nobody prefers Rod.
Nobody prefers anyone. Yeah.
At the village, it's all just everybody.
I think
sees
they
everyone.
prefer the elders, other than Rod and I.
Yeah.
If they preach, can they come visit me?
Yeah. I believe that.
Anyway, we should probably wrap this up.
Yep, we should. Well, thanks for tuning in. Good to be with you, Eric.
It was really good to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to be. I don't know. There's something about being up here in our little
Our
loft
little
space.
lofty space.
Feels right. So, all right.
I think you're on.
Talk to you next week.